Well, the haters gonna hate, 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 and the fakers gonna fake, 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 baby. I'm just gonna make, making luck, a Dominion podcast.
Willkommen haciendo chance. A Dominion podcast.
What was that, like 3 different languages?
Maybe.
And then Dominion. What language is that?
No, then I just said a Dominion podcast. Welcome back to Making Luck, a Dominion. As you've heard, we've got Adam Horton. What's going on, Adam?
Hey, I'm doing okay. How are you, Wandering Winder?
Well, I stabbed myself and then shattered a jar of tomato sauce earlier today, so I'm doing great.
In that order?
Yeah, within like 10 minutes of each other.
Wow, so like you didn't stab yourself with the shattered jar of tomato sauce?
With a knife. And then...
Wow. Wow, that's an eventful day right there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
My day was definitely not eventful.
Really?
Parker slept for 15 hours last night. So
wow.
Yeah.
It was mostly just like an event for like 15 minutes, but sure.
Okay. And then we went to go buy tulips and plant them. So like, yeah, that's...
Oh, is it tulip time?
We didn't plant them though.
Yeah, we didn't plant them, but we have the tulips now. Hey, my wife is down here. She's showing me on the baby monitor. I just put the baby to sleep.
He's not asleep.
He's not asleep. I don't know if you can see this on the thing, but he's wiggling his butt in the air. And yeah.
Are you sure he's not asleep? Couldn't he just be like sleep wiggling?
Oh, he is a sleep wiggler. You know that.
I don't know that actually. Maybe Megan knows that though. Maybe you were talking to Megan. I don't know.
Yeah. Do you want to say hi to the podcast?
Hi.
She only said one of the 4 words.
Can you say to the podcast?
To the podcast.
Yes.
We
so
did
this episode we are joined by our new co-host and executive producer of the podcast, Megan Horton. She's here.
She gets all the proceeds.
Yeah, she knows a lot about Dominion. She knows all of the Dominion. Can you say something about Dominion for me?
I think there's ravens, birds.
Yeah, ravens and birds. That's nice work. So this episode is about ravens and birds.
Wow.
This episode is about ravens and birds. It's going to be pretty great.
Welcome back to Making Luck, a Ravens and Birds podcast.
Yeah, it's just like that.
I love that it's ravens and birds.
Yes.
Slightly implying that ravens are not themselves birds.
Well, I mean, ravens are birds.
Maybe they aren't.
But maybe they aren't. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There he goes with the butt in the air. He's doing great. Parker's doing great. So anyway, yeah, it's been a while since I've been on the podcast. I wanted to thank Wandering Winder. Thank you, Wandering Winder, for being a mega bro and doing like about 55 episodes of the podcast. What? I should buy a Smithy. That's what Megan says.
Ooh,
and I think I will,
Smithy
actually.
Is OP.
Smithy is pretty OP. So, Wandering Winder, he did some episodes of the podcast. Did some episodes of the podcast, and it was really great because I didn't have to do them. I mean, I edited them, but I got to tell you, it made my life a lot easier, and it allowed me and also Jake. But Jake's not here, so screw him. If he was here, I would say screw you. But
even though he's changed usernames like 4 times since then. But that's still what he is on. Wait, no, he changed it also on. Whatever.
On Google, he's that.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh. He's like in various different screen names at various different places now because he keeps changing so many times. Anyway, we're doing a really good job of staying on topic.
I blame you, Wandering Winder. This is almost all your fault.
I blame me, Wandering Winder.
Okay. Good call. So yeah, I was gone for a while. It was really great to take an extended break from the podcast, and the break is still not technically over. I wanted to at least give you an idea of what the immediate future of the podcast is going to be like. It's not necessarily going to be like just Wandering Winder talking to himself. I got to imagine that's difficult to do for like an hour, right?
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean, now you're gonna at least have hopefully 2 hosts on an episode. I wouldn't say we're gonna have a schedule in the immediate future. I think it's at this point, whenever some people feel like doing a podcast, we're gonna do it and we're gonna publish it. But it's not necessarily just gonna be Wandering Winder by himself. I'm gonna be on maybe some episodes, maybe Jake is too. But we still got to get that figured out. Yeah, whatever. Jake's fired from the podcast. Hashtag blame Jake.
Hashtag blame Jake. Hashtag
in
I
any
blame me.
case, yeah. But in any case, I want to at least give you an update on like why this is happening and taking so long and why it's going to be this way. So I have a new job. Shortly after I came back from my Survivor experience, which I talked to at length, there's a whole bunch of mini-sodes, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that I needed to get out of my job. I was interviewing and dealing with all of that, and I did manage to get a new job. By the time I was last on the podcast, of course, I wasn't able to talk about it yet because it hadn't been completely finalized and stuff. But I have a new job. I'm happier at this job. It's better for my mental health. Although, I still haven't yet completely ironed out my life around this new job the way that I had for my old job, which I've been at for over 10 years. So I'm still getting the rest of my life figured out. And once the rest of my life gets figured out, hopefully I can make it to the gym twice a week. And then at that point, I can justify putting a podcast back in my life. So that's a little update on the world of Adam Horton and why Adam Horton was not
On the Adam Horton
doing
podcast.
podcasts. Yeah, on the Adam Horton podcast. But in any case, I'm ready to start doing these things. I need to relearn how to do editing now that a lot of things about my work and family and my entire life has changed, hopefully for the better.
It's kind of weird because you've still been editing all of the podcasts in the meantime.
Yeah,
But
and
it's been harder
editing.
because you have less. Your schedule's different.
Well, yeah, and also if I'm on a podcast, I kind of know what to expect,
Mm-hmm.
so it's a lot easier to edit.
Right. So basically, I've just been making life really hard for you because I've been doing the podcast.
No, because if you weren't doing the podcast, then I don't
You
think
wouldn't have had
I
to have
would have been
edited a
able to.
podcast that you weren't on. All
No,
I'm hearing is hashtag blame Wandering Winder.
No, the point is, I don't think I would have been able to take as long of a break. And I mean, I went for a long time without playing Dominion. I've been playing a lot of Slay the Spire. We might do an episode about Slay the Spire.
Slay the Spire. I'm so bad at. I mean, I don't know how bad I actually am, but I think I'm pretty bad at that game. But I am having a lot of fun playing it.
Oh man, Grand Finale is just so much fun.
A terrible card.
It's
but
so
just
good
one of
though.
those games that's so much fun to lose at, and
Oh,
those
yeah.
games are rare. And I think that's a sign of a great game. I think the other game that I can think of that falls into that category is Pandemic.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, it's a roguelike, so you're going to lose a lot. Hopefully it's fun to lose.
I don't know what that means.
A roguelike? It means death is permanent.
Okay.
There's a couple other things, too. The levels and things are randomly generated. Anyway, welcome to Making Luck.
Like the color red.
A roguelike podcast.
A Rouge-like podcast.
A Rouge-like podcast. But in any case, I'm sort of back into Dominion. I'm finding time to stream one night a week on Wednesday evenings on my Twitch channel. Hashtag link in the description. So, feel free to check those out, or the interesting games will be highlighted, and they're put on the YouTube channel, so in case you don't follow that, that's now also a thing that's happening. I do hope to keep that up.
Hey, Adam.
Hey, Wandering Winder.
Have you tried winning?
Not always. It's difficult. But for those of you that were wondering why Adam doesn't play rated games, well, I play rated games now. They implemented the banned cards list and the liked and dislikes card list, and that took care of the reason that I didn't like to play rated games, and so now I play rated games. Isn't that neat?
Sure.
Yeah. So speaking of playing games of Dominion, didn't you have a kingdom from the last podcast?
We did have a kingdom from the last podcast. Do you want to read it out, or do you want me to?
I'll do this one.
Okay.
So in this kingdom, we had Beggar, Native Village, Harbinger, Death Cart, Bandit, Haunted Woods, Journeyman, Spices, Treasury, Grand Market, and we had Piazza and Citadel, and this game had shelters. One more time for our audio-only listeners. Beggar, Native Village, Harbinger, Death Cart, Bandit, Haunted Woods, Journeyman, Spices, Treasury, Grand Market, and we had Piazza and Citadel, and this game had shelters. And last episode was about Beggar, so that's why Beggar was in this kingdom, and you said that you had played this game, it came up on the ladder, right?
Yeah.
So what were your comments when you were originally wanting to bring this kingdom up? I believe you had them reserved, right?
Yeah. So when I originally played it, I got a couple bandits and a harbinger and some spices and was playing money-ish, and I lost. And my opponent got 5 harbingers. Did they ever get a 6th one? They only got 5. 5 harbingers, a bandit, a beggar kind of late, and a thingamaboo, a citadel, right? And the game was kind of close feeling, but they went second and won by a couple provinces. And I'm like, huh. And so my thought after that was, what can I learn here? And what I tried, because we played some games, you and me, right?
Yeah.
What I thought to try was maybe going more aggressively for this beggar thing because of Harbinger and Citadel. And that hashtag synergy is there. It really is, and you might disagree with me. But the problem is you're putting these 3 pieces together to make the bad cards into an okay card. And you could just get good cards.
Yeah. So when you read my comments last time, I advocated for something money focused, right?
Yeah.
I think I said Haunted Woods was the main feature of that money deck.
Yeah.
And I mean, it matters, right? Especially if your opponent goes for Haunted Woods, then you do want to get your own Haunted Woods.
I don't know
but I think
about that actually. I was so where I eventually, maybe we should just skip straight ahead to where we ended up after playing a bunch of games, right?
Yeah.
So I got to, you want to open silver, you want to get a bandit, but if you hit 5 on turn 3, you want to get a spices before you get the bandit.
Right.
And then you get some spices and you want to build up to Citadel. But and I think you agree with this basically,
Yes.
right? But here's where we diverge a bit is I think at this point or around this point, as you're getting these spices on your 3-cost hands, or for your 3 coin buys, I like getting harbingers, and I think you don't ever like getting harbingers because you think harbinger sucks.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. I think a Harbinger is a bad card. I think there are very, very few situations where you ever want it, and I certainly think that this board is not a situation where you want Harbinger because you could just buy silver or maybe beggar in some cases.
Really think that Harbinger is actually good here.
I really think that it's not.
Enough
but
money
yes, go ahead.
Otherwise. But the reason why is mostly is because of Citadels here.
I think Harbinger's worse because of Citadel.
Really?
Yes, really.
But why?
Because I think Citadel. Okay, I think Citadel's good here. I think you agree, right?
Yes.
Most of the time, your first 8 money hand should be going to Citadel. I think
struggle to find a situation where that won't be the case.
There was one game where I think it didn't work out that way, but anyway, it was weird.
I think sometimes province still puts you in a good position, but it's hard for me to imagine a situation where Citadel isn't better.
Sure. Okay. Citadel's good. And I think the reason a lot of the reason that Citadel's good is because of I think the 2 cards, the 2 or maybe 3 cards that I do like to put in this deck.
Yeah.
So Bandit, I mean, that's really great because you get a lot of gold.
Yeah.
And Beggar, towards the end of the game, it becomes a $6 card instead of 3, which is really great.
I like adding a Beggar later on also if you have not much money.
Right. And also, like, if your opponent gets a Haunted Woods and you end up with a Haunted Woods in your deck, having the Citadel on that is great because it gives you a huge hand next turn. And, you have Spices in your deck with the plus buy to take advantage of this kind of stuff.
Sure.
All of this stuff is way, 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 way better to use with your Citadel than Harbinger. I don't want to Citadel a Harbinger. That's terrible compared to all this stuff.
So the reason why I like Harbinger is that, like, I want to be playing an action that I want to double every turn. And I feel like the deck that you're building, you more often end up with hands that you don't have any action that you're doubling.
That's true. Yes.
And so I like Harbinger because it's like it turns into a Lost City with a little bit of upside once you have which is not great by any means. Once you have the Citadel, it's not great by any means, but just like I like being able to have that more often. And then it also sets up more often. You don't even need. It's not like I want to get a lot of Harbingers because I'm not hitting 3 very much because I hit 4 and then I want to use a Coffers to get a Spices instead, right? So like, it's a kind of a marginal difference because it doesn't come up that much. And then like you, at a certain point, I'm like, well, give me a beggar now,
right?
Because the game's ending close enough that the shot of money from the beggar is good, and the cost of adding the Coppers to your deck is meh.
Right, for sure.
The other thing that I guess we could get into, but is, I don't know, I think I like getting 2 bandits, but sometimes I think that depends a little bit on how your draws work out. Sometimes I like just getting 1, because I also want to get Spices a bit before I get my second bandit, so that I can make sure that I hit that Citadel pretty quick. The Spices they help you hit the Citadel because the Coffers.
Yeah, it's definitely all about getting that Citadel online ASAP. And I think however many $5 buys you feel like you can afford to devote to bandits before you're like, okay, I need to get some Coffers because that's how I'm going to be hitting 8 soon. So then you're going to go for the Spices. Yeah. So yeah.
I generally wasn't impressed by Haunted Woods. I think if you get it late enough, whatever, but like I wanted to get a second bandit rather than the Haunted Woods generally. If it's early enough, and or then I just get Spices, and I never really found a time where I liked the Haunted Woods.
I think the only times that I liked the Haunted Woods is when my opponent got one first.
There was one game where somebody in your chat suggested, well, shouldn't you go for like building and get a bunch of Grand Market?
Engine. We had multiple people ask why we weren't going for the engine.
And I didn't understand like what exactly the engine was, because there's a few different ways that you can, like, generally I think when people say the engine, I'm not trying to be like
don't worry
about this.
I'll be a jerk about it. Go ahead and I'll do it.
I generally think people mean a deck that draws, and which is fine. But there's like a few different ways you might try to draw here, and I don't know. Do you mean like get a bunch of native villages and journeymen? Do you mean Haunted Woods instead of journeymen? Do you mean not native villages and you're just going to use your Citadel actions? What are you doing to make this quote unquote engine? And like there's a bunch of different options. So saying the engine is non-specific enough that I can try to build what I think you mean, and you might look at it and say that's not what I meant at all. Which I did try a few different ways of trying to draw with Haunted, like going straight for Haunted Woods or Journeyman, and they all felt like they're just falling a bit flat. But the one time when somebody said what they meant was like get a bunch of Grand Markets, I did that and I won.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like that strategy is very good anyway, because I felt like I got like virtually perfect draws, and it was still a close game, and it just didn't feel that great. I don't know.
Sure.
I mean, I think it's like okay, but you have to get the. I think the biggest problem with trying to draw a lot here is there's no thinning. There's like kind of native village.
Yeah, you can use Harbinger to set up your native village.
Use Harbinger to set up getting your draw cards more often, but you're just going to end up with like you're always going to have 7 Coppers and all this garbage in your deck, and you have to add a bunch of treasures to get to whatever your components you want are anyway. Sure, Citadel helps a bit, but like the money isn't that slow, and you're never going to be that consistent or that big.
Yeah.
Like the money-ish kind of stuff we were getting was
You can,
occasionally double province. Not
yeah.
most games, I think it wasn't, but like one in 3 or 4
happens.
games, you'd get a double province hand.
If I have a Haunted Woods out and then I Citadel a beggar, like that's a double province hand, and
Or
that
sometimes
happened
you didn't even have
never.
to do all of that, because like sometimes you'd gotten several spices, and you just like, I have 5 coffers, and I played beggar and with the Citadel, and I made 16.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of people in our comments section were talking about they would try to draw cards. And maybe I just built it wrong, but I didn't have success trying to do that. So I don't know. Your mileage may vary.
If you can't do it, Wandering Winder, nobody can.
Except for all the other people who can. Like, seriously, I'm not.
So nobody.
Sure.
Nice. All right, yeah. So there was a video published to the channel. It was like 2 weeks ago at least. So it's been up for a while.
Or if you're listening to this in the far future, it could have been like 100 years ago.
Ooh, yeah.
Or like 1,000,000 years ago.
I hope
YouTube
I'm still alive.
Exist in 1,000,000 years.
I hope I'm still alive at that point. Leave a comment in the comments section.
Future
what
Adam.
year is what year is it when you watch this? I want to know.
Future Adam, leave a comment in the comment section.
Yeah. Future Adam, future everybody, but especially if your name is Adam.
All of you who are listening are in the future.
Wow. That's so deep.
Speaking of deep, tax.
That was a really good segue.
Like the
I thought it
scooter?
was no. Different kind of segue.
So tax, we should probably read tax, huh?
Yeah, you wanna read the text of the card?
I would do that if I were prepared well and had it pulled up. But let me
Okay,
try to
I'll
do
do
it here
it.
from memory. It's a 2-cost event from the Empires expansion. I know I'm good so far, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it says put 2 debt tokens on a supply pile.
All right, it's close enough.
And whenever somebody buys a card from that pile, they have to take the debt tokens.
Right, yes.
And then there's a setup part that says that you put, before the game starts, you put 1 debt token on every supply pile.
Nice. You hit all the high notes. I mean, the wording was
how
different,
it basically works, but you wanna read the exact wording?
I guess. It's the 2-cost event. It says add 1 debt to a supply pile. And then it says setup.
Add 2 debt to a supply pile, right?
Dang it. I have the card in front of me and I can't even read it.
I'm
See,
like,
this
that
is
would be
why you
massive
read it.
change.
Then it says setup, add 1 debt to each supply pile. When a player buys a card, they take the debt from its pile. So when I first saw this card, and actually when it was being developed and play tested, the similarity. Well, yeah, I guess. But yeah, the similarities to Embargo are pretty obvious. Yeah. And we did an episode about Embargo, episode 62. We're going to link it in the description. Maybe you want to give that a listen, or maybe you've already heard about it. And I think, there are a couple of similarities that Tax has to Embargo, but, the similarities are pretty short. You're spending $2 in a buy, and it's, the symmetrical effect, but you kind of hope that you can get some more value out of it than your opponent.
Yeah, it discourages people from buying a particular pile.
Yeah. You can get around both of these things by using gainers instead of buying it, right? So, if I buy a card from a pile, I have to take the debt, but if I use like an Ironworks or something to gain that card, then the debt stays on the pile.
You can also get around it by just buying something else.
Well, yeah, that's.
Or you could just say
true.
like, "No, I'm just going to take it, man."
That's right. And then I think the other similarity is like you want to tax something or you want to embargo something that you kind of already have more of, because you're making it more difficult to get more of that card. So if you already have more of it, and it's worth taxing or embargoing, then you might have an advantage. And you want to press it by taxing or embargoing.
I think that's like a subset of what you want to embargo or tax, right? It's you want to embargo something or tax something that is more valuable for your opponent than for you, which sometimes because you already have more of it. Sometimes it could be because you're playing totally different strategies and your strategy doesn't care about the card and theirs does. Or sometimes it might be like, you have a point differential and this is the way they could catch up. Or there's other reasons maybe, right?
Yeah, I think the most poignant example is when you're taxing the point card piles, and we actually did give some advice on this in the embargo episode. If you are behind in the game, then you might want to tax provinces early because your opponent could, they want to get provinces earlier than you, so you have a chance to slow them down because they have to be first to get them. Or if you have a lead in points and your opponent's going to need the duchies to catch up, you could tax the duchies instead. And that advice, I think, is similar for tax and embargo. And this now ends the section where we talk about how they're similar because tax is definitely very different than embargo.
Woo!
Yeah.
Yeah. So how they're different. Well, one of them is dissuading by debt, and one of them is dissuading by curses. So that's the first and kind of most obvious difference. So like sometimes curses are worse than debt, and that's usually
Yeah.
junking your deck sucks, and paying too money also sucks, but not as bad. But sometimes debt is worse than curses because like you've got a trader in your hand or a watchtower in your hand or something like that, and like the curse wouldn't be so, or like you really needed to gain extra cards to be fuel, or you were gonna pile out on curses, or whatever the weird ways that I love using embargo for. There's not really usefulness to having debt on a pile that you actually want to buy.
Yeah, for sure. I
Hashtag
think
edge case possession.
Well, yeah, for sure. So like I think in embargo games, having curses is really bad, right? Unless you can trash the curses somehow.
Or make use of the curses otherwise somehow.
Right. And so we care deeply about those things. And that really affected the power level of embargo.
Yeah.
Because if you couldn't deal with the curses somehow, they were a permanent negative effect on your deck. That was a huge big deal.
Because they're junk and they're negative points. That's 2 negative effects at them.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
But with tax, yes, we care about it almost every game because in almost every game, people are using money to buy cards. So that's a much more common thing, but it's just 2 debt instead of a curse. So it's a more common effect, but it's just a less magnitude of an effect.
Right. Depending to some extent on like how much something's been taxed, right? I might rather take a curse than 30 debt. But
but you had to spend 15 taxes to put 30 debt on that pile too.
I mean, maybe my opponent spent 12 of the taxes and I only put 3 of them.
Wow, I want to play against that opponent.
I have had piles taxed out the insert appropriate euphemism here.
Yeah, it's funny because here's a fun fact. Tax is one of the cards that I ban from my IRL tournaments. And
it can be terrible.
Well,
in terms of fun, not in terms of like strength. It can also be terrible in terms of strength, but
yeah. So actually, the reason that it's banned is just because it takes 30 debt tokens, and that's like a lot of debt tokens, and there are a ton of other cards that don't need as many, and I'd rather use. So that's the reason. But yeah, for some reason, tax is not very popular.
Well, I think part of it is, I think a lot of it's the setup. It slows everybody down, right?
That's a big deal for me. Like when I see tax come up on my randomizer app, I'm like, I do not want to deal with those debt tokens.
But also, it gets you to the feel bad sometimes, right? Because sometimes it's like, well, buying this card is the best thing for my deck, right? But it has debt on it. So if I do that, then I'm making this part of the game asymmetrical because I bought the card and I took the debt, and if my opponent buys the card, they don't have to take the debt. So it's
Yeah.
making it asymmetrical in a way that's not good for me, right?
It feels bad, yeah.
And it just feels bad. But like, obviously, you don't want to sit around and do nothing ever. So like, at some point, if you want to win, you got to do something that, at least to some extent, feels bad. Unless it's one of those rare games where you never need to buy a card, or one of those rare games where anytime you buy a card that has debt on it, you can immediately retax it, like at the same turn.
Or the part of your brain that processes how things feel bad was damaged.
Right. So like, if you're a psychopath, then you're fine.
Hopefully with tax and dominion. Also, listening to this podcast would help you get better. Maybe, I would hope. So that's also.
I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or
Me neither.
whatever.
Yeah. But it's funny. I originally brought up the whole tournament thing because, like, even with 30 debt tokens, I've still had people ask me for more debt tokens. And I looked over and it's like there's just piles of debt on, like, absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And the two of them are like, I don't know how we got to this situation, but, like, at a certain point, nothing was worth buying.
Yeah.
Because there was so much debt, so they just taxed everything more.
Right.
Like, I feel like both players have made some pretty poor decisions to get here.
Usually. But, like, it can get to the point, once there is a ton of debt on everything, then, like, you know, if every pile started with 10 debt on it, then you really wouldn't ever want to buy a card, right?
That sounds, yeah.
Because it's going to help your opponent more than you. And so if you somehow get to that situation, which you usually shouldn't, but if you somehow do get to that situation, then it can kind of make sense that it spirals out of control, because I don't want to buy that because it'll help my opponent more than me in a significant way, right? And so I don't buy a card, so I buy an event. What event is on the board? Tax. There are a few situations where I think it can actually be, like, strategically good to get a bunch of taxes, and you kind of get this tax oblivion, which can be super miserable. And I think the things that you want to watch out for are, like, other reasons why you wouldn't want to buy a card to start with. So we're talking about mission, because you can't buy a card. So if you, like, take a mission turn and you still make 12 and 6 buys, you're going to tax 6 times probably, because, like, probably better than doing nothing, right? What else are you going to buy? So
yeah.
So that could be pretty miserable. But Swamp Hag, because, like, I don't want to buy a card because it'll give me a curse. Haunted Woods, I don't want to buy a card because it'll put this junk back. Possession, maybe. These can be just, like, kind of really nightmare kinds of scenarios where the heat death of the universe is something that you might be contemplating. So I can understand why people don't like tax, but also then, like, sometimes sometimes it just is that, like, okay, you probably shouldn't have taxed this much to start with, but we're here now.
This is the world we live in.
Well, I guess it probably makes some sense to talk about why you usually shouldn't be getting into these tax oblivion nightmares, right?
I suppose, yeah.
And that's because that usually adding cards to your deck is a good thing and is more important than trying to avoid the tax being relieved from your opponent. Like, yes, it is asymmetrical in a way that's bad for you to take a card and remove the debt from a pile when your opponent might be able to take the card without the debt. That is, in a way, asymmetrical in a way that's bad for you, right? But if you think about it, let's just say you go pass, pass, pass. Then player 2, they could buy, like, a silver, let's say, and take a debt, and they're going to have that silver in the next shuffle. And even if the opponent then goes and says, I can buy a silver without taking a debt, it wasn't in that shuffle, right? It's going to be a whole shuffle later for them before they see that silver. So even though they get the advantage of, I didn't have to take the debt, the other player got the advantage of, I had the silver a shuffle sooner. And that's usually a bigger deal than taking 1 debt or 2 debt or even, like, 4 or 6 debt sometimes, right? So like having the card is usually a bigger deal than having a small amount of debt for a whole shuffle, right?
For sure. I think if we like step really far back from tax and we just looked at very abstractly, like what is the cost of tax?
Right.
And so
To buy.
it's two and a buy. But if you look at the best case for tax in terms of cost to your opponent,
Yeah.
it's $2 and not a buy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's the most favorable way you can possibly look at it, because 2 debt is not as bad as $2, and also you have to assume that they're going to take that, and it actually matters
Right.
immediately.
Because
Right?
the other thing is, if you do tax card A, that would be the best thing for them. It's only even $2 if the difference between card A and the next best card is bigger than 2 debt, right? Because if there's a substitute card that they can get that's almost as good, right? They're going to buy a peddler instead of a treasury, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Like, okay, they're just going to buy the peddler then, and you didn't really cost them the debt. What you cost them was the difference in quality between treasury and peddler, which is pretty small usually.
Yeah.
So
Right. So if you're trying to think, I mean, this really isn't favorable. You need
No.
something else. You need some additional context or additional situation to
Right.
make it favorable.
there's a couple of ways that can come about, right?
Yeah, but I think I mean there's a couple of them, and there's certain ones that are better than others. But I think what it boils down to is that if I'm gonna make it so losing my own money is causing my opponent to lose effectively the same amount of money is going to be favorable for me, then I think I want to be producing more money on my turns than my opponent is.
Well, I think there's an exception to that, and the exception is you weren't doing anything with the money anyway, right? If you have exactly $2 left over from whatever else you wanted to do, or you only had 2 on the hand and 1 buy left over, or more than 1 buy left over, then like getting tax is often better than nothing, right? If
Sure.
in that case, the $2 that you're spending wasn't actually turning into anything tangible, right? And in that case, sure, tax is better than nothing in a lot of cases. But if it's affecting, like, I was going to get some other card, then the opportunity cost is real, on top of, and it's going to cost your opponent more than you, right? So like the biggest exception to what you're saying is just like, I wasn't going to do anything else with the money anyway. But other than that, it's usually going to be that either A, there is some card that your opponent really needs, and the money is way more. But basically, it comes down to the money is more important to them than it is to you.
Yeah, man. And usually, I mean, that's
And pretty significantly
quite often
important, because again, there's opportunity cost, right? I could have gotten something else, even if it's just an estate or a copper or whatever. And okay, you were never going to get the estate or the copper, maybe, but sometimes there's other 2s. Sometimes you don't have exactly 2 left. If you're multi-taxing something, you could have gotten a 4. Sometimes you had 3. There's often it's costing you something real and tangible to buy tax.
For sure. So, like, the easiest example I can think of is if I'm making 16 a turn and my opponent's making 8 a turn.
Right.
I would gladly do something that sacrificed 8 of my money if it took away 8 of my opponent's money. Now, that's not exactly how tax works,
Right.
but that's a situation where it's favorable for me to do this kind of exchange.
Yeah.
Whereas if we're roughly the same, this really isn't doing anything for me, because I would be better served just advancing my own game, serving my own interests, right? And that's a lot of the point that we've been building up to pretty much this entire time.
Right. I mean, even in the case where you have 16 and 8, that makes tax somewhat more appealing for you than it would otherwise be. But in a lot of cases, it's still better to get something on the board as opposed to tax, right? To buy a different card or event. It's just, in that situation, it might be worth, quote unquote, wasting extra money and being less efficient with your money than your opponent is, it's fine to be less efficient because you're making so much more of it.
Right. So I think, I mean, this is a pretty abstract situation.
Hashtag
I would,
abstract.
yeah, I would say the most common way that I see this happen in a real game of Dominion would probably be in like endgame dancing. A lot of the times, I've said it's a generally good play in a lot of situations to leave one more province in the supply than the number that your opponent can get, right? That assures that they are not able to win the game on their next turn, barring
Adam,
3-pile.
that sounds like a gross oversimplification that's still slightly useful.
Right. It's a gross oversimplification, but let's say that was a thing that you wanted to do.
Right.
Well, now you have this. Let's throw tax into the party, and that definitely adds another wrinkle because now you're affecting how many provinces your opponent can get. So let's say there's 3 provinces in the supply, and my opponent can double. Well, normally I wouldn't want to take any provinces. I want to get some duchies, and it feels really bad. But what if I get 1 province and tax the provinces a whole bunch? Now they can't get 2 provinces, because once they take the first one, they have to take all that debt and pay it off before they can get the second, and they just can't do it.
Right.
So this is one situation where, this dynamic of reducing both of our payloads is helpful. Because even though I've scored the same number of points, I have less bad cards in my deck, and now there's this additional thing that's happening. What were you saying?
Well, what I was going to say is, this is a situation where you want to think about using tax in the end game, but
Right.
It isn't just a foregone conclusion that, yes, the best thing to do is to use tax, because even in the situation you're describing, it depends on more things than we've talked about here, right? Because sometimes the symmetrical nature of the debt on that pile doesn't work in your favor as much as you'd like, because sure,
Right.
you put 4 debt on provinces so your opponent can't double, but if they don't get any provinces at all, then now there's 4 debt on the province pile that you'd have to take if you want to take those provinces. So not only does it need to be this kind of situation, but it also needs to be that you're able to generate more of a payload so you can deal with the debt on that pile more easily. It also needs to be the case that your and or their other options aren't so good. So like blitzing down for duchies wouldn't be a better option for you.
Yeah.
And you're not opening them up to, well, I can't double province, but I can triple duchy, and you're still in bad. Like there's all these other considerations that you have to think about before just saying like, well, now I'm just going to tax. But the important point is tax now opens up new options to think about.
Yeah, and you're able to take more advantages of those options if, number one, you have extra buys. Right. If extra buys are hard to get, then tax is obviously going to be less good because it costs a buy, and you'd rather just be getting points or whatever.
Right.
But also, if you have some extra money on your turn, that can either give you those options to get those taxes in these situations, or take away your opponent's options, because if they are able to put 4 debt on the province pile and I'm just able to make $4 more and not care about the debt and still get all the provinces I care about, well then now they don't have that option, and maybe that would have been good for them.
Right. I guess I want to swing back around to something I just thought of as you were saying this. Is somehow reminded me of this.
Sure.
We were talking about earlier about differences from embargo.
Yeah.
The difference in how tax is like inherently inefficient, because you're spending at least as much and often more than your opponent, is also makes it different from embargo in terms of sometimes embargo can shut off let's say you want to go for a strategy that is based around getting a bunch of apothecaries, but like if you open potion, your opponent opens embargo. What are you going to do, right? Like,
well, you're going to be really sad in a lot of cases.
Right, but with tax, like, what are you going to tax the apothecary every time they buy one? I guarantee you're getting behind if you're doing that, right?
Yeah, so in terms of the symmetrical effect, right? I mean, tax has a smaller symmetrical effect, and that situation that situationality of the embargo where it was more narrow. In these situations, that was definitely one of those embargo moments. And of course, embargo is going to be a lot bigger there. Also, it's not nothing that like you get to put this card in your deck and then play a terminal silver.
Right.
So like you're kind of getting the 2 money back in a case where maybe it would have been more useful. So like, there's certainly differences there.
I guess the point here is that tax is like a temporary thing. So once somebody buys the card that has all the debt on it, the effective tax is, well, once the debt is paid off anyway, the effective tax is gone, right? It's not still there. With embargo, you put an embargo token on that apothecary pile, every apothecary they buy for the rest of the game or until the curses are out is hurting them. But like if you tax it, okay, you taxed it once. Big deal, right? You're going to have to tax it again and again and again and again if you really want to dissuade them. So whereas sometimes embargo can be useful because we're playing really different strategies and I can embargo this card, this pile that you would need a lot of, you can't really do that with tax.
It's a lot harder to do it with tax.
Yeah, nearly as well. You have to tax it many times,
right?
Which basically makes the tax, even though they both cost 2, makes the tax more expensive in that way.
Yeah, so tax is definitely a more short-term kind of effect.
Yeah.
And, it's an event, and so you're going to get a more immediate impact, unlike embargo where you have to shuffle a card in your deck and draw the card and then play the card, right? So there was, when we were doing the embargo episode, we did talk about one of the best cases for embargo being to where you got to play it as quickly as possible after you decided you want to get the embargo, right? With tax, you're getting the effect right when you decide to buy it, and so you have the flexibility to wait until exactly the right time to get the effect. And also, in embargo, you have to play that thing in your action phase. So if I want a copy of card X, but I also want to embargo it, it's really hard to do with embargo. But with tax, I can just buy that card and then throw some debt on it.
Right.
And usually you want to do it in that order, right? You want to buy the card and then tax the card. But
Hashtag possession?
There you go. We found the edge case. Oh, but there's
like always the edge case.
Okay, but there's another one. There's another edge case. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
Where you would want to tax the card and then buy the card so that you take debt.
I'm ready.
Because if you have contraband, okay, and you want your opponent to think that you're not going to have that much money, so you take some debt, and then later on you play that contraband, and they won't deny you what you really want because they don't think you can afford it,
I wasn't ready.
Yeah, that's right.
It really seems like you're overthinking that.
Well, okay, that is total garbage,
but
right?
What if they know that you know that they know that you know that you're trying to pull this?
Well, then you're totally screwed.
But
Hopefully
what if
they
you
didn't
go
listen
one
to
level
making
deeper?
Well, that you need to go 2 levels deeper. But once you go 2 levels deeper, then you're good again. So yeah, got to keep that in mind.
All right. Is there anything else we want to say about tax?
I have a couple other things, if you don't mind.
I do mind. Please go ahead.
So one thing that sometimes happens is in the opening, in the first 2 turns of the game, it will be the case that both players, they buy some cards. They buy the same cards.
Yeah.
And player 1 has a debt after turn 2.
Right.
Player 2 does not.
Right.
Second
player advantage. Woo!
Yeah. That feels bad for player 1. I just want to point out a couple things. First of all, player 1 is still player 1.
Yeah.
All of those advantages for being player 1, like maybe getting an extra turn, attacks played are just way more effective as player 1. All of that stuff still there.
Getting the card and taxing it before your opponent has a chance to get it.
Yeah, still there. Okay, so just try and keep that in mind if this ever happens to you. And also, I wanna just point out that one debt, like, it doesn't matter in a lot of cases. Sometimes it takes a $5 hand and craps all over it. Sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so I just, in the previous podcast, we've talked about making sure you know what you're going to whine about before the game starts.
Right.
And while this is a potential candidate, you have to know that this is actually going to hurt you before you whine about it. Because if you whine about that one debt and then just pay it off, be like, oh, well, whoops, I guess it didn't matter. Then you lose some whining credibility.
Ooh,
And you got to think about
inevitable is bad.
yeah, you got to think about the timing of your whining as well as what you want to whine about. So remember that when you're doing your pregame considerations.
Yeah. And also, slightly more seriously, I guess, you can plan around that as first player, right? So,
Yes.
especially on turn 2, you probably know exactly how much money your opponent has in their hand, because in a game with tax, it's unlikely that they're not going to want to spend all of their money.
Right.
And so, at least by turn 2, you can then anticipate, okay, if I get this, then they can do this. And so you can mitigate that downside somewhat. On turn 1, sometimes you kind of just have to go for whatever thing.
Oh, yeah, by the time you know what your opponent's turn 2 is. So like as second player, I
Yeah.
see them do their first turn,
Right.
and then now I'm in a position that maybe I could consider taxing something as second player. If I have like $2 or $3 on this hand, then I could consider a turn 1 tax because I think I know what my opponent wants on turn 2.
Right.
That
Or
can be a
maybe-
really strong play.
Or maybe you buy something differently because they spent 3 and bought a 2-cost card, and so they don't have any debt, and you have 4 on turn 1. You don't necessarily want to buy a 4 because then you know they won't have the debt, and they whatever. Like, maybe, I don't know. But the point is, whatever the situation is, you can think about it some. Although there is some limit to that, because you don't want to way overthink it. Like on turn 1, like, then they'll get this card, and I don't want to get this. Like, first of all, fast game, fun game.
I'm with you, man. I feel
But second of all, like, at some point, yeah, okay, so it's like Adam was saying. Okay, so I have an extra debt. So what? I don't want to end up getting a much worse card or not getting a card at all just because I'm afraid of, oh, but they'll get this card without any debt. Like, it goes back to that situation where I was talking about earlier. Well, yeah, but they have the extra debt, but they also have the card in their shuffle earlier. So
yeah, that matters.
yeah.
So the whole opening with a tax, if you think it's going to hurt your opponent's turn 2 buy, just keep that as an option in mind. And then also I want to point out something that normally feels kind of bad, but often can be one of the better things available given that tax is around and maybe you're getting the short end of the stick. You can almost always open double silver and not take any debt into your next shuffle. And while that may feel bad,
Yes.
opening with like a turn 1 silver and paying off 1 debt with your $4 hand, often that can be the best thing you can do because you don't want to take debt away from some other pile.
Right. And
for
then
your opponent.
So your opponent can then either open double silver and then you're just even with them like in a normal game, or they can take the 4 with a debt, and you have to kind of determine, like, is it worth it or not? How much better is the 4 cost for you to take the debt or not in comparison to just getting a silver?
Yeah, and certain kinds of 4 costs, I think it matters the most for 4 costs. So certain kinds of 4 costs are definitely this way more than others. And actually, we did talk about this. Yeah, we did talk about this in the Overlord episode because it's really the same thing. You're taking a debt into your next shuffle, or in Overlord's case, maybe a lot of debt. So what kind of cards are worth it in order to do that? And the advice we gave there was you're looking for cards that trash, or maybe attacks. And I think those are the 2 big categories of cards that are usually worth taking debt over into your next shuffle in order to get now. If I'm just going to look for something that makes me more money, then that's not nearly as good because the debt I take could offset some of that money that I take. So if I'm looking
it
at...
offsets it some, but you could also say that the extra money you're making is offsetting. The problem is, like, for the comparison, it's pretty rare that a 4-cost card makes more money than a silver.
And that was exactly what I was going to say. Man, you are smart, Wandering Winder.
No.
Yeah, you are.
Great minds think alike, Adam.
Oh, you. So do small ones. I know that hit
Hashtag
me just
awkward
as hard as
silence.
it hit you. Yeah. But yeah. Anyway, that's yeah. That's all I got to say about tax.
Okay,
Do you want to?
I do.
All right. So here's some surprise bonus content for you.
Yeah.
This is like a bonus episode, like a bonus mini-sode, like a
No,
0.5 right here.
Yeah. It's not a big topic, so we didn't want to give it its whole episode, but the tax stuff went just fast enough that I think we're going to go for treasure map.
Yeah, and so I just want to point something out here. I mean, tax and treasure map, they're kind of marginal cards, but they do play their role, and so we were gonna call this card. Go ahead, Wandering Winder.
Well,
This is
so
it's too good not to
I wrote
share.
my outline before Adam wrote his outline for this episode, and these are both marginal role players. And this episode, of course, is the return of Adam Horton. So it's marginal role players, the return of Adam Horton.
This is the best episode of Making Luck.
So treasure map is a 4-cost. Oh man, I don't have the errata text for this either. I am so behind today.
Can I?
Yeah.
I'll read it.
Okay.
Treasure map. It's a 4-cost action. It's from the Seaside expansion. It says trash this and a treasure map from your hand. If you trashed 2 treasure maps, gain 4 golds onto your deck.
Yeah. So keep in mind, it doesn't work with the weird edge casey stuff that you might want it to work with, like the Overlord or Band of Misfits. They've been errata, right? The rules have changed. So anyway, it doesn't work. That's the important thing to know. Okay.
You need to have 2 real treasure maps.
Yes.
Like bona fide, like the text on the physical card says treasure map. Nothing
Yes.
pretending to be a treasure map.
Right.
You needed to buy it. You needed to put it in your deck, and then both the one you play and the one you reveal, right? They both have to be the real thing.
You could have gained it and not bought it, like
Okay.
Workshop, or you could have summoned treasure map. Which
I princed a treasure map once.
Yeah. Did that work out well for you?
It did. It actually hit.
I would have suspect that you wouldn't have done it if it wasn't going to, but generally not to be recommended.
It was definitely not a good play. I only did it just to say that I had done it before.
For the troll factor?
Definitely.
Yeah, okay. So
it
anyway,
felt amazing.
This card is a card that, it gains you 4 golds, which has its upsides and its downsides. Mostly that's upsides. But the problem is it's kind of hard to get it to work out well for you. So let's talk about just plowing straight in treasure maps as soon as you can. Just buy them and like
$4
stuff. Right? At $4, I'm buying a treasure map. $3, I'm buying a silver. $4, I'm buying another treasure map. $3, I'm buying another silver. I hope my treasure maps line up. If I remember right, and it's been at least 5 years since I looked at this, doing that, going for treasure maps, is better than just straight old big money that never touches treasure maps. And the win rate difference is like 1 or 2% between the two of them. It's like basically nothing. You should get more than 2 treasure maps if you're not colliding your treasure maps right away, because if you only get 2, then it definitely hurts you. Unless you collide them right away.
And then like you can collide. You can collide the 2, and don't be sad that you have this other T map stuck in your deck.
Play it and trash it.
You just play it, and then it's gone, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like it's better to have loved and lost than to have never loved at all.
Hashtag true fact.
Hashtag serendipity. Hashtag live, laugh, love. Hashtag boss babe.
So this strategy is really bad. Some people, a long time ago mostly, thought that, well, sometimes I'm going to do this because just like on turn 5 or whatever, I'll have my 2 treasure maps, and some percentage of the time I'll just wake up with them colliding. It's like 30% or something. Don't quote me on that percentage, but it's something like 30%, right?
Yeah.
And I'll collide them, and then I have 4 golds, and I'm just going to roll that on, and I'm going to take my 30% chance of winning the game just by doing that. and I'm going to laugh all the way to the bank because I think I suck as a player in comparison to my opponent, and 30% feels better than my expected win rate to me. So
Well, I mean, if you do that, you might suck as a player because that's not a good line of reasoning.
A, that's true. B, also, adding 4 golds to your deck on turn 5, as it turns out, does not just win you the game.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. I've just been
Stunning,
cheating and doing that in my IRL games and then declaring victory.
Just declare victory right there, right? I have 4 golds. I have the high ground.
That's right. It's over.
It's over. You underestimate my ability to build a Dominion deck, Adam.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So even if you can be like, I'm going to get this lucky collision on turn 5, that strategy is. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you could guarantee it on turn 5, it'd be something that you would do sometimes. But A, you can't, and B, well, you can't, and C, like A,
Rip.
Q, 4. Anyway, the point is, you're gonna lose more often probably than if you didn't, and you're not gonna learn anything. So don't do that. But okay, there's some things that can help this kind of a strategy. There's more or less you've got your sifters and you've got your savers. So sifters, you've got warehouse or dungeon, or there's probably other ones, but you don't really want expensive ones because you want to be able to get them really fast. So warehouse and dungeon are kind of the 2 main ones there, right? But then you also have your savers. So that's save itself. You've got cards that top deck. So like Courtyard is a big one here, actually. Haven. Those things all help you line your 2 treasure maps up a lot more quickly than you would just by random chance. And coincidentally, they tend to also be helpful for decks that have just had 4 golds injected in them, because you want to be able to find like 2 golds and 2 silver, or 2 golds, 2 silver, 2 golds and 2 coppers or something like that to be able to buy your province, right? So the sifters help you line that up, or the savers help you say, well, I had 3 golds this turn and I didn't need all of them, so I can save 1 till the next turn, something like that, right? So they help you smooth. They help you smooth out once you have the treasure maps also. So like both sides of that coin help. So those things help this treasure map strategy a lot, but it's still not a very strong strategy generally. Like if the board is super weak, you might go for it, but the board needs to be pretty weak before you'd want to go for that.
So I would say that like you're looking for these particular deck control resources, right? Anything that can help you line up your maps.
Right. So that's one kind of deck control where it's not like it's not what I typically think of in deck control in terms of it doesn't help you draw your deck. It helps you connect particular things together more than drawing your deck. But what's usually actually better for treasure map is drawing your deck. So thinning your deck out.
That's like, the big one.
Even if there is no draw on the board, just like I'm going to chapel down and then get 2 treasure maps. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, chapel treasure map is actually good money. It's a lot better than
or donate treasure map. Whatever it may be. Just getting it once you thin down the problem that those strategies often have if you're just playing them as money is that like you need a lot of money or you're going to stall out. 4 golds is a lot of money pretty efficiently, so that helps a lot. But also just being able to draw a lot is the biggest thing. So the combination of thinning and draw is usually what helps treasure map the most. And at that point you're turning 8 money in 2 gains, or 8 money in 2 buys, or 2 gains of 4 costs, and you're getting 4 golds. And that's a pretty good deal. It's kind of like Windfall, right?
Yeah.
But you have to spend 2 gains and a little more money. You get an extra gold. Now 4 golds isn't like the best payload ever, but it's not bad.
I would say those golds are particularly good when you have the thinning.
Yeah.
Right? If you're able to draw everything, I mean, obviously you have good deck control, so you want to add payload, and it's an efficient source of payload to do this.
Right.
However, if you're looking for efficient sources of payload, I'm really thinking about the situation where my deck really only has like 5 cards in it. If 2 of those cards are treasure map, or if Windfall's out, I mean, it's the same thing with Windfall.
Right.
This is a great way to just shove a bunch of gold into that deck. And those golds are going to be a lot higher value in a deck like that, which would normally have to take 2, 3, 4 turns to put that kind of payload in the deck. Now you can just do it immediately.
But
So it's going to shine the most there, even though anytime you're drawing your deck, you're going to get most of that benefit.
Yeah. If you're leaning a little more on the draw aspect of things, you can partially run into a thing that, like, 4 golds on top of your deck is going to make it pretty hard to draw your deck. There's some ways around that, like you have some duration draw setup or whatever that can bail you out. The biggest way to get around that is probably just like, I'm overdrawing my deck so I can draw at least some of the golds right after I gain them. But this tends to be the best use for treasure map, and it's relevant on, like I say, it's not the best payload ever, but it's not bad at all. So it's relevant on a pretty decent chunk of the boards where you can get to where you're drawing your deck and would like, extra added payload. 4 stop cards is not trivial to add, but if you have the draw already, then you can probably add more draw cards with, because there are apparently draw cards on the board that let you draw like this. So you could probably use your extra money to add more of those, and you're not really losing out on that much reliability. So it's definitely something to consider. Yeah,
4 stop cards matters, but like $12 of payload matters, especially when you don't have to work that hard for it.
Right. So, but still, sometimes there is other better payload. Like there's some really good payload nowadays, right?
For sure.
Sometimes you might just want to play with, I don't know, some action cards that really help your payload a lot.
I mean, Conspirator comes to my mind.
And maybe also perform some deck control function, like Conspirator or Grand Market, or whatever it may be in the particular case you're in. It's just, if you get to this point where your deck control is really good, really think about treasure map at that point, because it's not the best thing ever, but it's quite solid. The other thing that even heightens treasure map a little bit more in these situations is trash for benefit, right?
Yeah, gold's, a lot of these other expensive, or a lot of these other payload cards that maybe have a deck control function, a lot of them don't cost 6.
Right.
So this is, if you care about the cost of cards you're adding to your deck, this isn't just $12 a payload. This is $24 a payload if I'm going to salvage it all, or
butcher it, or
or remodel it or something.
In addition to that, it's not just that it's $24 worth of stuff. It's also 4 different things that you're going to be able to feed to your trash for benefit stuff. So like if you're remodeling,
you can spice merchant it. Oh, sorry, what?
Yes, if you're spice merchanting and you have no other way to gain cards, like we talked about in the beggar episode, there's no other way to gain extra cards to your deck other than the only plus buy is from spice merchant, and the only gain is to collide 2 treasure maps so 2 cards turns into 4. That is something you can do. #edge case.
I actually did have that matter. There was a game where Tactician was the only plus buy.
Yeah.
But I formed a double Tactician deck where I was bishoping the golds as payload.
Right on.
So the only other plus buy was the Tactician, but like I was gaining the golds and then I was bishoping the golds. And that beat the crap out of Warehouse Treasure Map, but that was mostly because...
That's classic trash for benefit, working with jamming a bunch of golds in your deck, right?
Yeah, it was pretty great.
A gold is a pretty good card for payload, and it's a really good card to feed to many, many different kinds of trash for benefit cards. Spice Merchant, not that much, but I guess.
I was trolling when I said that.
I know, but #edgecased with Adam Horton.
You know it, man. I mean, all of this stuff, I mean, you did make the comparison to Windfall.
Yeah, and I think that is the closest comparison.
For sure. I mean, just shoving a bunch of golds in the deck that you're drawing, that's kind of where you want to be with both of these cards.
Yeah.
T-map works when you're not drawing your deck, but, it's a little bit clunkier when it comes to everything else. I would definitely say that Windfall is kind of a better version of Treasure Map, but
Yeah, well,
how often does that actually matter when you're directly comparing the two?
right.
It's like often when I say like there's a lot of room to be worse than Windfall and still be good.
Yeah.
Not even if they're on the same. I mean, they're not always gonna be on the same board, but Treasure Map is still good here. It's kind of like I say, like there's a lot of room to be worse than me at Dominion and still be good, just because I'm really great at Dominion. But like most people are worse than me, and it's okay. You can still be good.
Or like I often say, there's a lot of room to be better than me at Dominion and still suck.
Oh yeah. I think the best players in the world at Dominion are still pretty bad.
Yeah, it's just what you're like on a relative scale, or what baseline you want to say. How good is good?
Yeah, what does good even mean? What does is even mean?
Is.
Oh. I don't think we could top that. I think we can move on, yeah?
Is that the sound of a kingdom exploding onto everyone's screens or ears? Or hopefully your eardrums don't explode. I think that would be pretty painful.
Yeah. I please, if you're listening to this, please don't have your eardrums explode.
Rip headphone users.
And make sure you're using your seatbelt if you're driving.
Yes, or
Not
if you're
texting.
a passenger in a moving vehicle.
Yeah, seatbelt, please. It's important.
And if you're listening to this while on a plane and your flight attendants or crew have told you to, have your tray table up and your seat back in the full upright position.
Yeah, please. I would really appreciate it if you did all those things.
Okay, so we've got a kingdom.
Yeah, you want to read the cards?
I will read the cards. So we have
Sweet.
Courtyard, Moat, Cutpurse, Quarry, Treasure Map, Recruiter, Scholar, Bank, Expand, Forge, with the events Tax and Expedition. Once more for our audio-only listeners. That's Courtyard, Moat, Cutpurse, Quarry, Treasure Map, Recruiter, Scholar, Bank, Expand, Forge, Tax, and Expedition. Adam, what do you think?
Well, I mean, we got both tax and treasure map here. Obviously, I'm going to tax the treasure maps.
Turn 1?
And turn 2 every
And turn 3 and turn 4.
It's happening. No, I'm kidding. Well, I mean, tax.
How many
tax
taxes
makes
do you need on Treasure Map to make it more efficient to just buy 4 golds?
We're going to find out, man.
Next time on...
Right. So I'm looking at this. It's a little bit difficult to talk about the opening when you don't know what's. I mean, there's a lot of different situations. Yeah. It's not just 4-3 versus 5-2.
I was going to say this is something that we didn't talk about with tax, I guess. But 3-4 versus 4-3 and 2-5 versus 5-2 make a difference with tax.
Yeah, for sure.
But
I'm looking at what matters here, and Recruiter is a really good card. It's the only village, and I want to play some terminals here. There's a lot of potential for really good payload here with Expand.
Probably also the best trashing, because while Forge trashes more cards, you kind of need to be able
expensive.
To... It's expensive. We have 3 7 costs on the board, by the way.
Yeah,
but
man.
A, it's expensive, but B, you have to... I don't know why I go with the A-B paradigm so much. Anyway, B, yeah, for Forge to really be effective, you need to be drawing a lot of cards first. And you can't really draw a lot of cards before you've done some recruiter stuff, so you're probably doing recruiter stuff before you're forging, by which point, is it really worth getting the forge? Probably not.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I mean, recruiter matters because it's a village, and you can certainly get a lot of villagers here, which you're going to need to do. So I think, once you're thin enough with the treasure maps, shoving some golds in the deck and getting a whole bunch of villagers seems like something that I may enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So that is certainly at the front of my mind. I think treasure map is going to be pretty important here.
Yeah, I also think that Expand is probably going to be important as a way to gain multiple provinces in a turn.
Well, there's no plus buy. The only way to get more than one province in a turn is Expand.
Or Forge.
I mean, you can do it with Forge, but that's pretty terrible. So expand.
Really hard to do it with Forge, yeah.
Now, I'm not going to say that I'm never going to get a Forge here, because there are some tools here. There's Quarry and Expedition.
Expedition is the biggest thing that might point you towards Forge, but I really doubt I'm getting a Forge, because
I mean, it's I don't think it's likely, but I'm just saying it's likely that I will open with a Quarry here.
Yeah.
Because that, it maximizes my chances of getting that Recruiter ASAP.
Oh.
And probably a Courtyard. I mean, those are my priorities. Quarry and Courtyard. I want those 2 cards. But it's very likely that I'm going to wake up with a hand on turn 3 where I'm looking at 3 coppers and 2 estates. I'm like, I can get an Expedition here and feel pretty good about my life. And then all of a sudden I'm looking at $7 on turn 2.
At least fractions.
Yeah, or the ability to buy a 7 cost. And I'm thinking about Forge versus Recruiter, and I've got a crunchy decision to make. And I mean, that Forge is looking pretty saucy right now.
Ooh, saucy.
Yeah, look at that saucy Forge.
Yeah, I don't know. The tricky thing here, I could also see, instead of Quarry, maybe going for Cutpurse. But
As player 1, I'd feel a lot better about that for sure.
If I'm going for Cutpurse, then maybe I don't want to go for Courtyard. I don't know. The other thing that gets thrown in this a little bit is like Expedition.
Like a turn 2 Expedition isn't the worst thing ever.
Yeah, and like, let's say we both have 4-3. I'm player 2. You open Cutpurse. That makes me want to open Cutpurse rather than Quarry, because I think the difference between them is less than a debt, I think.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm not really sure whether I want to open, and it may depend on the split and the player order and what my opponent has done, because if I'm player 2, I'm somewhat more likely to want to mirror because they've cleared the debt off for me.
And then as player 1, you're more likely to get the Expedition because, hey, I've got, or if you have $3 to spend, because now you're not clearing the debt off the Courtyard, right?
But
so, I mean, it matters very much the specific situation that you're in.
Except that it's hard to get $3 as player 1.
Oh, well, yeah, it is.
You've got a 4 beforehand.
Ripperoni.
I guess you could open. This is the other thing you could do, though, is if you have 3 on turn 1, you could open Expedition and try to spike a Recruiter on turn 2.
Ooh. Yeah.
Which seems pretty good to me.
Yeah. That's slightly above 50-50.
It's 60-40, isn't it?
That's slightly above 50-50.
No, wait. It's way better than that.
You have 4 and you're drawing
2.
It's 60-40.
No, you're drawing 2 extra cards.
Yeah, that's even more slightly above 50-50.
It's you need to 2 out of 5 and 1 out of 4 is what? I can do math. It's 90%. You're 90% to be able to hit 5.
Ooh, that sounds pretty hot.
And some percentage to be able to hit 6. I don't want to calculate that.
But I don't care about hitting 6.
You kind of do, though,
because
you got to pay
debt,
the debt,
I guess.
right?
But sure. Okay, fine.
So if I have 3-4, I'm probably opening Expedition. If I have 4-3, I'm less enthused about opening Expedition, because then I need to hit Copper, which is 4 out of 5 times 3 out of 4, which is 60%. That's the 60% chance, right? If you have 4-3, you're 60% to hit Recruiter then.
Okay. So I think the other crunchy thing to talk about is, how do you draw cards? I mean, you need Recruiter, you need Villagers to do it, but you can use Courtyards, Moats, or Scholars.
Expedition every turn.
Or Expedition. So you can only get 1 Expedition.
Yeah, because there's no plus buy. So
it's likely that I will want some supplemental source of draw.
Yeah.
What do you suppose that supplemental source of draw might be?
Well,
I'm probably going to have like a Courtyard in my deck at some point, because it's just better than Moat, right?
Well, you could get Cutpursed.
So yeah, I'm probably just going to have a Courtyard on my deck because it's better than Moat. And it's cheap. But is there room for a Scholar in the deck? Do you think Scholar fits?
Well, I think you could get a Scholar at some point, maybe. But I don't want it to be my draw very early, because like, if all I'm doing is playing Recruiters and Treasures, then Scholar gets me to my recruiter a little bit faster than Courtyard, probably. But like, I probably already have a Courtyard. They don't play
Get
that
another
well together.
recruiter in that case.
And you could just get another recruiter.
Yeah.
And yeah, but by the time I'm doing a lot of expand shenanigans, at that point I might fit a Scholar in.
I could easily see expanding maybe an estate into a 5 cost, and even though it may be expand food, like I could see choosing Scholar because of the utility it has to like keep a turn going or something like that.
The other question I
I
have
could see it
though,
happening.
the other question I have though is, how do you think the end gamey, not the end game itself, but like the payload, like are you eventually building to you're just going to be getting map collision like multiple times and expanding all of those golds into provinces? Or are you mostly buying things still with a little bit of expand? Or you're just buying the thing? Or what do you think you're going to end up with there?
I think most of the payload is going to come from expand.
Okay.
I'm wanting like at least like 2 or 3 expands in the deck, possibly more.
The other thing that kind of plays into that a little bit is if you somehow end up with like 2 money or a small amount of money, and your opponent's like, I'm going to be buying provinces as a significant part, and you're like, I'm just going to be expanding them, you could tax the provinces, right? And
I guess, but like I don't know. I
it's
think
pretty thin
expand's
for that
good
to
enough.
come up because you're probably not going to have that much money, and do you really want to tax? If you have 3, you probably would prefer expedition at least.
I think expand's good enough.
Yeah.
That I want that as my payload anyway.
Yeah.
And tax just isn't effective against that, and so I don't think I'll bother with tax.
Yeah. And recruiters, you're going to need to feed stuff to them eventually, but treasure map also helps there.
Yeah.
You'll eventually end up with 1 recruiter. Like you probably get 2, and then you recruit another recruiter, or you expand it to a province or something.
Yeah.
And eventually, like, you trash a couple of golds to your recruiters, you have 1,000,000 villagers, you could even expand the second recruiter. I mean, the world is your burrito, oyster, or other food product that you prefer.
Oyster burrito.
Ooh, I don't think I've ever had an oyster burrito. I'm actually very sure that I've never had an oyster burrito. I don't
Well, now
particularly
we know.
I don't particularly like oysters, and I don't particularly like burritos, so ripperoo.
Well, I don't think you're super close to a large ocean or large body of water. Where I can't imagine the
On a
oysters
galactic
you are.
scale, I'm extremely close to a large.
Sure, but I mean, I'm
Although-
not exactly close to fresh oysters, and I don't think
Actually-
you are either.
Well, there's a restaurant in town that ships them in from various places, and they're incredibly expensive.
Yeah, I bet. Probably expensive enough that you don't want to fill a whole burrito with them.
But regardless, actually, I'm not sure that I'm close to a particularly large ocean on a galactic scale. That's an interesting question because,
Yeah.
while
Because
I'm,
how
I
large
am-
is the ocean on a galactic
I
scale?
was going to say,
Yeah?
on a galactic scale, I am particularly close to Earth's oceans, but I don't know if Earth's oceans are large oceans on a galactic scale. I don't know the other oceans in the galaxy, how large they are. Maybe Earth's oceans are small in comparison. I think there's Europa, the moon of
I was
Jupiter,
about to bring up Europa.
has a larger ocean than the global Earth ocean, I believe.
Yeah,
Not
but
sure
I mean,
about
it's ice, well, at least on the surface.
They're
Yeah.
not sure exactly what it's made out of.
Europa's so cool.
Dude, Europa.
Europa. They,
Kind of like
making what?
the
A Europa podcast.
the source of all of the languages that I began the podcast with. Europe. That's not how you pronounce it. Europe. Yeah.
Well, yeah, let us know in the comment section what you think of not only this kingdom or this episode, but
if you think I'm
particularly Europa.
Also, if you think I'm particularly close to, if you have some information about how close I am to a large ocean on a galactic scale, I'd love to
Ooh.
hear about that in the comment section.
I definitely want to hear about that too.
I'm quite frankly more interested in that than what you think about the kingdom, but you'll probably be more interested.
I'm interested in the
kingdom's
kingdom
ability.
as well. So yeah,
I mean, the
any
kingdom's
comments you got.
interesting, but like
Yeah.
galactic scale and oceans and stuff, more interesting.
That'll
Kingdom's
really
fun.
get your brain going. Yeah.
Maybe we'll see. Leave a comment in the comment section if it really got your brain going.
Yeah, and if you're not watching this on YouTube or listening on YouTube, you can just head on over to adamhorton.com. We're going to have links to everything, the Discord server, the YouTube channel, all
And
the
not
places
just
where
stuff
you can
about
get
the
this
podcast
podcast.
or us, but everything.
Yeah, pretty much everything.
No, probably just stuff about the podcast or us is what
I
we'll have
guess.
links to.
Yeah,
Or the
and
topics. Yeah.
there's also some forums there if you want to check them out. So,
So
yeah,
Worf had
feel
a
free to
purple
do that.
space bazooka, and
Yeah.
that's an actual reference. Leave a comment in the comment section if you know what I'm referencing.
It's really good to be back. It's really good to be doing the podcast with you, Wandering Winder.
These jokes just aren't nearly as fun when I'm talking to myself.
Really, you don't have that laugh track there, and that's so important.
It
tells the
is.
audience that it's okay to laugh. Too.
Laughter is contagious. It's like a virus that infects you until you can't breathe anymore and you start crying.
Isn't that great? I'm so glad to be infected with your virus. Oh man, that went to a place.
Wow.
I want
know
to thank
you
you
felt
again
that way,
for
Adam.
keeping
Thank you,
everything
Bill.
warm on the podcast while I was taking a break. We're gonna. I can't tell you we're gonna be having more episodes more often in the immediate future.
We're gonna
But
have more episodes at some point.
yeah, we're not dead. We're not done with the podcast. Dominion's still pretty great.
In 4 more episodes, we'll have our 100th episode.
Yeah, we got to think of something cool to do for that, huh?
If you have an idea on what we should do for our 100th episode, leave a comment in the comment section.
Yeah, man. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
I don't think we'll actually see them next time. Like, I can't see any of the viewers of this podcast. Maybe you have some weird technology that lets you, like, see people who consume your content, in which case
Well, I've met some of them in
take
person.
the dolphin noise out, but
Leave a selfie in the comments section.
leave a selfie in the comments section. Leave a troll selfie in the comments section. So, like, if you have an image of a troll that's taking a selfie, you can do that.
No. Don't let that substitute for the real selfie. I want
Leave both. Leave an image of a selfie that you took while standing next to a troll.
Okay. That's fine. I'm in.
Or sitting next to a troll. But if you're sitting in a car next to a troll, please wear your seat.
Make sure the troll has their seatbelt buckled as well.
Yes.
Yeah, man. It's important.
It is important.
It's the law. Click it or ticket.
In many places, it is the law.
Did you know that in Ohio, if the driver is 21 years or older, people in the back seat aren't required by law to have their seatbelts buckled?
I did not know that.
Isn't that stupid? That's the stupidest law ever. Make
That is
everyone buckle their
Definitely
fucking
not the
seatbelt.
stupidest law ever, but it is very stupid.
Okay. It's up there, though. Okay.
Man, there have been some stupid laws, let me tell you. Leave a comment in the comment section if you have a stupider law than that you know about. So I voted
Oh,
Tuesday.
boy.